concluding our study of 1 Timothy, and it has been a real great study for me personally to learn to guard my heart a little bit more and to look internally and let God use that to wheedle out some things that need to be wheedled out. So as we conclude in chapter 6, towards the end of the chapter, we're talking about dangers that we can avoid. You mentioned that yesterday as your sermon title. As Americans, we make enough to provide for ourselves. We can become very self-reliant to the point where we can get focused on that stuff almost to the point where we don't need the Lord in our lives. And so how would you speak to helping us guard our hearts towards being focused on being self-reliant versus seeking Christ in righteousness and seeking Him truly and totally?
I think just do what the text says, be generous. I mean, one of the best ways to guard your heart from materialism and greed and over-dependence upon your wealth is to give it away. Now, I don't think he's saying give everything away and go live on the street in a box. That's not what he's saying, because he says that God has given us all these things to enjoy. So it's okay to enjoy what God's given us. It's okay to enjoy what God has blessed us with. But Deuteronomy warns us that wealth has a tendency to cause us to forget the Lord. And the reason is because we don't. We stop trusting Him for daily needs. We stop crying out for daily help because we have the means to take care of it ourselves. And so to guard yourself from sliding even unconsciously into that self-reliance, I think we have to consciously choose to live with an open hand, to notice, how can I use this resource that God's given me to be a blessing, to be a servant, to be a help to somebody else. And so be generous, be ready to share, make it so that you can share. Sometimes a situation will arise, at the end of the month, and you've already spent all your money and you're not able to share and help because you just don't have it until you get paid again. So sometimes maybe we need to put some in a savings account for the express purpose of helping when a need arises.
Right. Okay. It is so interesting how God works on Sunday, because in our Grow group on Sunday morning, my husband Kyle teaches that class, and he alluded to that we can go about life kind of with blinders on. And I think we can do that with our finances too. We just, we pay the bills quick, we pay our tithe quick, and we may not be open and perceptive and listening to others around us who might be in need.
Yeah, and some of it's planning. I think it's Dave Ramsey that talks about if you don't plan where your money goes, then it just evaporates. But if you plan where it goes, then there seems to be more of it, and it's intentional. And I think sometimes we have to simply choose to be intentional about helping others.
Right. Yeah, and blessing others with the extra that we've been given. Well, we just talked about using our resource to help others, but how can we, in a more long-term sense, come alongside someone to help them, not just monetarily, but maybe to go beyond that? Because I think that's a frustration. I know it is. As a church, a lot of time we have a benevolence fund that we help people with, but sometimes they need beyond that.
Yeah. I think a great example, there's a couple in our church that's doing it right now. They are helping a young man get on his feet and learn how to be a man. And he's coming out of generational poverty and not understanding some critical life skills about taking care of himself, taking care of his family. And so they have entered into his life in a very financial way, in a very personal way, in order to help him get out of the situation. And it's costly to them, but they're doing it with joy because it's the right thing to do. It's not just giving him a fish, it's teaching him how to fish. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of resource. But I think that is the right mentality. That's the right direction we need to be going. And so it's not just about giving someone a handout, although that's not wrong. I mean, but sometimes that only perpetuates the cycle. We need to be creative in helping people out of that situation that they're in, and just giving them a handout is probably not going to help them out of the situation. So what is it that we need to do? How do we need to enter into their life and help? And that's not quick. It's not an easy fix. It's not something that you can just write a check and be done with. It's something that it requires you, not just your money, but you entering into a real relationship and being willing to help them step out of that scenario. And so I think that's where we need to be more involved as a church family. Helping children, taking children into your home, or entering into finding someone and pouring into them, mentoring them, helping them. There's all kinds of things you can do. The reality is, I can't just sit here and list off a bunch of things that we ought to go do. The reality is, every single person in our congregation or listening to this, they have different resources, and they have different skills, they have different talents, they have different abilities. Use your creativity. Use what God has gifted you to do and to be a help to someone else. And that could be as huge as helping alleviate the starving people in Africa to helping a guy here in Macon. So just be creative. Be intentional. Right.
And if you see someone hurting or limping along, or you physically see or experience their hardship, I think sometimes we can think in our mind, I don't want to get messy, or that's too much, they're too much for me. And I think some prayer about that is a very good thing for God to change your heart. But okay, so let's flip side that a little bit.
Okay.
I know I have a couple of friends who they have everything they could ever possibly want and way more, but yet they don't have Christ. And so as a Christian and as their friend, one of my constant battles is living my faith out to them. Where can we begin with people who have everything they ever need to sharing Christ with them?
Two things. Pray, because only God can change the heart. Jesus said it's impossible for the wealthy to enter the kingdom of God. Why? Because they're so self-dependent and self-reliant. They don't think they need Christ, because practically in life they don't need anybody. They can take care of it themselves, and so it's harder for them, and it's impossible without a change of heart. And so the only one who can change the heart, who can soften the heart, who can make the heart alive, who can bend the heart, who can straighten out the twisted heart, all of that is Christ. So you've got to pray for them. But the second thing is, we've got to speak to them. You've got to tell the truth to them. Living out our faith is good. It gives us a platform to speak. But if we never speak, then living out our faith in front of them is not useful. It won't accomplish their salvation. It's through the hearing of the gospel that God changes lives. And so have confidence in the power of the gospel and speak the truth in love to them. So, it may not happen in one conversation. It may happen over a series of conversations. It may happen as you serve sacrificially and give sacrificially, and they ask you why you're doing that. You talk about the gospel. You talk about Jesus. So you have to be praying for them constantly. You have to be speaking the truth in love to them constantly. You have to be consistent yourself in your life. Right.
Trying to be mindful of those ways that, maybe here on earth we are very self-sufficient, or we could look at the material part of that aspect of it. But there comes a point of death for all of us. And what then? And taking the conversation that way.
Your money doesn't help you. I mean, money can buy a lot of things. It can't buy resurrection.
Very good.
It can buy you great health care. But when you die, it's done. I mean, there's nothing money can do to reverse death. It can prolong life with good medical care, but it can't reverse death. Only Jesus can reverse death. And you need Jesus. Everyone needs Jesus. Whether they know that or not is irrelevant. They need him. And so we have to keep telling them that. Even if they don't listen at first, we have to be loving, we have to be gracious, we have to be patient, but we have to keep speaking the truth in love.
Very good. So I know we're finished with 1 Timothy, and from here we're going a little bit different direction. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So normally, and I think the best diet for a church is book by book preaching of the scriptures, because preaching is simply saying what God has said for the purpose God said it in the manner in which God said it. So when we stand up in the pulpit on Sunday mornings, our objective is to simply restate what God has said, clarifying what he means and how we ought to respond. And we do that best by preaching through books of the Bible. Occasionally, though, there are times where we want to address a certain issue. And so as Macon FBC, our motto, our purpose is to glorify God by making disciples. And so we've created everything we do is very intentional at Macon FBC. And so the process by which we make disciples is kind of spelled out, through our circle. And so what I'm going to do over the next 6 weeks is kind of unpack that circle. Why do we think these things are important? Why do we think these things are necessary for discipleship? Why do we think you need to be involved in every one of these key aspects every week to be a growing, maturing disciple of Christ? And so it'll take us about 6 weeks to get through that. And then we'll be right around the Easter time where we're talking about Easter and Christ and that. And then we're going to jump into a narrative following that, from the Old Testament.
All right, that sounds good. This has really been a great study of 1 Timothy. If you missed any of the sermons, you can go online to our website at hopeformacon.com. And if you've missed a sermon chat, you can also go to hopeformacon.com/sermonchat and catch any of those. But this has been great, and we will continue again next week.